Alright, so let me just close this off so you can see the camera actually does start off in the right place. I'll be quick about this because you gave me extra time to get this video and the last little bits of the scene right, so I won't waste your time. So the final scene has everything you come to expect: a terrain, a skybox, the pre-made models and custom-made models. I even made little retainer walls myself. Probably could have spent that time better elsewhere, but I made it early on. So, as you can see, I've got loaded files. As far as aesthetically interesting, I tried to get as much aesthetic points as I could by just like changing the fog color and the light colors to try and make it look a little bit better. But it's obviously not good looking. I would not consider it aesthetically pleasing, so that's probably a fail on that part of the thing. At least, not aesthetically pleasing. Or interesting. But all the textures are aligned. There's not anything graphically wrong with it. It's just bad looking. Scene does have multiple light sources. As you can see, I've got 3 different point light sources lined up with the heads of these lamps. That took a little extra time than I was expecting. And I've got one rotating, and therefore moving spotlight. As you can see, sometimes it rotates around to light up various models, including that pyramid. So none of these lights interact with the skybox, obviously. Yeah, so I also have a very light directional light that's a deep blue pointing this way to counteract some of these darker shadows. I didn't like them, so that's what I'm using the directional light for. Let's see. As you can see there's some moving elements, both the pyramid and the box. And speaking of which, those pyramid and box are the pre-made models. If I go into some of the code now, you can see that my models will take in enums and then call on model tools to create various different pre-made models. So there's pre-made models, and then the model tools have various different functions for box, sphere, pyramid, with the pre-setup vertices. Talking about some of the things that aren't pre-made models now, the Skybox class, is a pre-made model in a lot of sense of the word. It's got a model attached to it. It's just an inverse cube as far as vertices go. I make sure that it's always set up under the correct shader texture so the light doesn't interact with it. At the beginning of the game, I'll scroll up. I have it called Sky. You can see it's not my first time recording this. I want to make sure I get it right. So, I simply just create a new skybox, assign it this texture that I got once, and set it. And then once per draw cycle, I just render it under the texture shader. And then delete it once at the end. So the API is very clean for that as far as what's inside the DX app. That is similar to the terrain. Obviously, there's one extra step for setting the height map, which is right here. But, I set the texture, set the height map, set the world, and then set the material and colors. And then once per frame, I can just render it because neither the terrain nor the skybox should be changing. Though that would be interesting to see if I could get an actual, see if I could find something to do with that. But anyway, it obviously does have repeats for textures. If we go into the class, you can see I've got repeat U and repeat V, and that just sets this U spacing, bunch of stuff, but essentially allows you to choose how big it is, how many times the texture repeats, all the good stuff you want with that, as well as scale. Let's see. There's length. It's just always a cube, as one would expect for something like terrain. I guess you could make it non-cube, but mine's always not cube. What am I saying? Flat plane before the height map is on. A square. There we go. That's what the word is. Sorry about that. For vertex normals are set correctly, so my logic's pretty decent as far as this stuff goes. You know, not the most readable, I'll admit. But, you know, for each vertex, it gets the 6 vertices around it, obviously ignoring all vertexes on the outer edge, and then sets the normal based on those. Continuing on to, let's see, that's the terrain class. IUPI is all good. Now going into the shader class, let's start off with shader texture because it's the most complicated, and every other shader basically has a portion of this somewhere, and so this contains all subsets of the other shaders. Fog illumination, so I need to go into the shader file. As you can see, I've properly got the Phong model set up based on how you originally had it for the color light shader. And then when I'm calculating my directional light, point light, and spotlight, I'm using the Phong model and passing in the ambient, fuse, and specular, and that properly sets up the, you know, it just returns the values you would want. And then at the very end, my pixel shader uses those compute from the Phong model. Again, if you look in, you can see that I have a point of light 3 times, so that's the point light. I tried to use a spotlight, but it looked really weird to not have the lamp self-illuminate. I just closed that off like an idiot, but I'll continue on. Talking about the fog, I have, if we go back into the DX app, I have a simple function for setting the fog, if I can find it. You know, even with all these simplified functions, it's still a lot of stuff. You know, eventually it all becomes managers and pod managers as far as game dev goes. Or as we've seen with Game Engine. Where did I put that fog? Here it is. So I just set the fog parameters with the start, where it starts, what its range, and what color you want it. So if we go into the fog parameters, it really is just that, and that's all just fog data. And then inside the shader for, let's go back into the texture light, at the very end, you multiply the lit color by inverse fog percent plus the fog color times fog percent, so that gives you that smoothing. The exact logic is lost to me right now, but I remember thinking for a while how to get that right. Okay, so going on to the graphics object classes, these are a bit higher level. Continuing on just with more light texture, because, you know, everything else is contained inside of light texture. Oh, and obviously you can see that I was working with a perspective camera, because it was. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be able to see anything. But actually, I should just show that again. Let's go and see how it interacts with the camera, because I don't want to just say it works because it does. That would be rude. Where is everything? Yeah, see, it takes in the camera. It takes in the camera matrices. So with just view and projection, and it's a pretty simple pass-through with all the shaders. So sorry about the wait there for like 2 lines of code. That maybe I shouldn't have shown that. Graphics object classes. Again, back into light texture. You can see it takes a bunch of different items. So you can set and get the world from it. You can set the texture and material, and you can render it, so it really removes a lot of the fluff out of the DirectX, or I should say the hard work rather than the fluff. So when you render, you know, it's 4 lines of code pared down to 1. Also, just it deals with the P shader itself once it gets it. So that's all automated now, as one would expect. Going on to the mirror. Sorry, bit of Americanism coming through. If we, oh, I accidentally just click refresh on the Word page rather than booting it up again. The mirror does properly work with the lights. I'm going to boot it up again so you can see. Oh dear, it's a bit foggy. I'm going to turn off that fog. But if you see, the lighting is also correctly showing up with the mirror. And I've created a mirror class, so that's nice. Oh, that's the model class. So I did spend some extra time in mirror class. Again, I should have spent my time elsewhere and just had the mirror in its own scene rather than this scene, but I liked the idea of the water when I was looking at the sample scenes. I've got it maybe a couple more steps than would be expecting. So I've got a rendering for texture lit items and then rendering for itself, as well as adding things to the list of items to be reflected. So it's probably like one or, a couple more functions than could be the absolute minimum. But as far as what goes on inside, it properly sets the blend state, the depth stencil. It multiplies the correct things by the reflection matrices. And then also sets the mirror face and the front face back to each other to reverse the windings. I believe that's what that does. I need to look more into it. And then if we go back into the DX app, we can see that after I render all of the items, where's anything? There, down here. So I render all the items that will be reflected, then I render the mirror, the things inside the mirror, render the mirror itself, and then finally render the 2 things that I didn't want reflected in the mirror. Well, the 3 things, because the sky is also there. Mirror. So let's see, let's look at the last thing, DX actor changes. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Again, as you can see, I did actually spend a lot of time streamlining this because I knew I have a hard time reading giant sheets of code, and this is already much more giant than I would have liked. But, there's a lot of places where 4 or 10 lines of code is pared down to 1, especially when it comes to the mirror. I've got the special function for just adding things to be mirrored, so I don't have to constantly pass things through into the render. And so that's everything. I again thank you, 1,000% for helping me calm down when I was panicking. So that's everything. Thank you very much.